Something unusual is happening in Nigeria's northeast. The military says the number of terrorists and their associates surrendering to troops has increased by 213% in just 1 week. The development comes as troops under Operation Hadinkai intensify operations against terrorist positions, weapons, networks, and supply routes across the region. But what is behind this sudden surge? Is sustained military pressure finally breaking the morale of terrorist groups? Or are fighters simply changing tactics as security forces tighten the pressure? The acting military information officer of the Headquarters Joint Task Force Northeast, Captain Mohammed Goni, announced the development in a statement released on X. According to him, the theater recorded a 213% increase in terrorist surrenders compared with the previous week. Goni attributed the development to continued military operations against terrorist positions and their logistics networks in different parts of the Northeast. The military says its strategy is not limited to direct attacks. Troops are also targeting the systems that allow terrorist groups to survive, including their supply routes, movement corridors, and logistics networks. That approach is important because terrorist organizations depend heavily on the ability to obtain weapons, ammunition, food, and other supplies. Cut those networks, and the fighters become increasingly isolated. According to the military, that is exactly what is beginning to happen. Goni said the rising number of surrenders reflects a growing willingness among terrorists and their associates to abandon violence and submit to established surrender procedures. In another significant development, 2 high-profile terrorist members reportedly surrendered to troops, bringing weapons, ammunition, and other military equipment with them. The military described the discovery as further evidence that sustained pressure in affecting the cohesion and morale of terrorist groups. And that could be one of the most important aspects of the development. Terrorist groups depend not only on weapons, but also on confidence. When fighters believe their commanders can protect them, supplies will continue arriving and their positions will remain secure. They may be willing to continue fighting. But when those assumptions begin to collapse, the calculation can change. A fighter may begin asking a simple question: how long can this continue? That may explain why some members are now choosing surrender. The military also disclosed that other terrorist members surrendered to troops of 202 Battalion in Bama on August 7 at New Abaram. According to Goni, the surrender followed sustained military operations and internal disagreements within terrorist enclave. That detail is particularly significant. Military pressure can create problems inside armed groups. When supplies become scarce, movement becomes difficult, and commanders struggle to protect their fighters, disagreements can intensify. Internal divisions may then encourage more members to abandon the group. The surrender of one group can also influence others. Once fighters realize that surrender is possible, more members may begin considering the option. This could create a domino effect within terrorist networks. But there is an important caution. A 213% increase in surrenders does not mean terrorism has been defeated. Terrorist organizations have demonstrated an ability to adapt under pressure. Some fighters may surrender, while others may retreat deeper into forests or change their methods. Others could attempt to recruit new members or seek alternative supply routes. That means the military will need to maintain pressure rather than assume that a short-term increase in surrenders represents a permanent collapse. The screening of surrendered fighters will also be critical. The military said the terrorists who surrendered at New Abaram were screened, while mobile phones and other items were recovered before they were handed over for further action. Those possessions could provide valuable intelligence. Mobile phones may reveal communication networks. Weapons could provide information about the group's capabilities. And the surrendered fighters themselves could potentially provide information about commanders, hideouts, supply routes, and other members. In that sense, a surrender can become more than the removal of one fighter from a terrorist group. It can become an intelligence opportunity. This may explain why the military is encouraging other terrorists and their associates to abandon violence and use established surrender channels. At the same time, civilians are being asked to support security agencies by providing timely and credible information. That cooperation is particularly important across the Northeast, where vast forests and difficult terrain can provide hiding places for armed groups. Some security agencies cannot monitor every community and every movement without assistance. Local residents can identify suspicious activity and provide information that may help troops respond before attacks occur. The military says Operation Hardin Kai remains committed to maintaining pressure against terrorist elements while providing channels for those willing to surrender. Its stated objective is to degrade terrorist capabilities, restore security, and create conditions for lasting peace across the region. But Nigerians will judge the success of the campaign by more than surrender statistics. They will want to see fewer attacks. They will want farmers to return safely to their fields. They will want children to attend school without fear. They will want travelers to move through communities without worrying about ambushes. And they will want families who have lived under the threat of terrorism for years to finally experience normal life. The 213% increase is therefore an encouraging development for the military. But the bigger test is whether the trend continues. If more fighters surrender, terrorist attacks decline, supply networks remain disrupted, and the groups lose their ability to recruit and operate, then the development could represent a major shift in the conflict. If the surrender figures rise, but terrorist groups continue launching deadly attacks, then the situation will remain far more complicated. For the communities of the Northeast, the hope is obvious. They want the pressure on terrorist groups to translate into real security on the ground. They want the forests reclaimed. They want the roads secure. They want their communities restored. And they want the cycle of violence to end. The military says terrorist groups are increasingly losing fighters, weapons, supplies, and morale. The reported 213% surge in surrenders may be an important sign that the pressure is beginning to have an effect. But the real victory will come when terrorists can no longer recruit, resupply, regroup, or terrorize innocent Nigerians. That is the standard by which this latest development will ultimately be judged. For more updates, stay with us on News Express. I am Cassie Tony.